Hello and welcome to the Raw podcast brought to you by the Sunderland Echo. My name's Joe Nicholson and we're back for another preview podcast to look ahead to Friday night's championship match between Sunderland and Hull City at the Stadium of Light. So joining me to tell me about the Tigers, we are joined by Nathaniel Whittingham from the To Hull and Back podcast. Nathaniel, how's things at Hull heading into the game?
Pretty difficult at the moment. Things have only really got worse since the last time we played, which wasn't very long ago. I think the best we can hope for is that, just like the last game, but reversed, the home team has the better chances and then, sort of get that late goal and win the game. I don't see us being as confident as we have been, like this time a month ago. We've lost a lot of games recently, maybe been unlucky, but generally, if you keep losing games, even if you're playing, sort of good football, questions should be asked. We've got about 10 good players out injured, or they've been recalled by Burnley, like Scott Twine, he's gone back to Burnley. And then we've got one particularly important player away at AFCON, and then another who would certainly be in the team because we've hardly got anyone else, especially in the sort of forward line. A lot of injuries there. And you're going to miss the return of Jaden Philogene. He's only returning after the Sunderland game, and he was sort of carrying us through the first part of the season. So pretty tough. We're not playing poorly. It's just lots of awful mistakes, and we create chances. But despite signing all these attacking players who are good, finishing isn't really one of our best traits. So I'm not particularly looking forward to it, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. When you mentioned that game on Boxing Day, of course, it wasn't long since the last time these two sides met. And since then in the league, Hull have lost twice and won once. They've also had an FA Cup tie against Birmingham, which went to a replay, which they played on Tuesday, and they ended up losing that tie. So how have Hull kind of been playing in the last few weeks since that game against Sunderland on Boxing Day?
Well, against Blackburn, that was quite an open game.
That was the one they won, wasn't it? 3-2.
Yeah. We really struggle when we don't score first, and we've conceded first probably more than about 20 clubs in the league.
Mm-hmm.
We have been pretty good at coming from behind, but it makes it a whole lot easier when we score first. I'm not sure we've lost when we've scored first this season. Perhaps we have, but I can't quite think of it. So we got 2 early goals against Blackburn. We'd had 3 early goals against Rotherham. Those were easy home wins. But when we go behind, like we did against Norwich and Sheffield Wednesday, it makes it very difficult. Blackburn, it was an open game. We just had enough up front to win the game, but it wasn't an amazing performance. Sheffield Wednesday, we played poorly for the first half an hour. You may have seen the red card decision. I know there's a bit of debate over it, but that was since overturned. And they don't often overturn decisions if they're not quite certain it was a poor decision. Then, with 10 men away from home against what you could argue from a City perspective, 12 players rather than 11 with the referee, very difficult to come back from that. The Norwich game, first half an hour again, Norwich should have had at least 1 red card. The only fit striker we have left, except 37-year-old Billy Sharp, who we can't really rely on. Aaron Connolly, he's going to be out for the Sunderland game. Initially, he was just concussed, and now, he got poleaxed by Angus Gunn. Should have been a red. The foul given the other way. Gian Lunis, the left back, deliberately elbowing one of our players. Only a yellow card, ridiculous. Again, we created chances, but it's very easy to play against us at the moment. If you're a half-decent team, you will probably score a goal at some point because defensively we're not good enough, and even though we create chances, we're not scoring them. So basically, usually we just predict on the podcast what the score is going to be. This time, for the first time, we've just predicted what the awful refereeing error is going to be in the first half an hour. We think it might be a repeat of the Darren Bent beach bowl goal that we'll concede. So hopefully, if we start well and don't concede the first goal early and there's a referee decision, maybe we've got a chance, because we have been hindered by that. But really, it was the games before the last 3 where we played poorly. we've been playing okay. But really, February, once we've signed a few players in January and got Philogene back, we've got some home games. Hopefully we can restart the season there. But in my head, the Sunderland game is almost a write-off.
Well, of course, it's going to be live on Sky Sports, so it'll be there for everyone to see. You mentioned a couple of the players that have been out injured, and I've just got a list of Hull's top scorers here. Aaron Connolly is the top scorer with 8 goals. He's going to miss the game with an injury. Liam Delap's got 7. He's going to miss the game with an injury. Ozan Tufan, he's got 7 goals. As far as I know, he's available. Then there's Jaden Philogene, has 6. He's out with an injury. And then there's Scott Twine, has 4 goals for Hull this season. He's just been recalled by Bristol City. And then also, as you mentioned before, they've got Adama Traore and Jean-Michael Seri. They're away at the African Cup of Nations. Sunderland, of course, have their injury issues as well. But out of those players that are unavailable for Hull, who's going to be the biggest loss for them?
Well, yeah, I mean, firstly, it's in a way, even though Philogene was carrying us, having those players, especially with Twine, who started to score recently and then has gone to Bristol City on a, I think, initial loan deal. You'd think that because we've got all these good players who can score goals and are contributing like that, having them spread out over the team is pretty important. But then when 4 of the 5 top scorers go, and Tufan is somewhat inconsistent, that's a problem. Because I know some teams rely on one player, but Philogene, him going has basically collaborated with the downturn in form. And I think if we just had a striker, we'd be better. But Connolly's out and Delap is out as well. Delap had been on the wing, but they're all pretty equal big losses except Twine, who I think there's a bit of debate as to whether he was actually good or not. We're desperate to sign a winger now and a striker. But Philogene's definitely been the biggest loss. And until we get him back for the Millwall game at the beginning of February, which he should be fit for, I don't really see anything changing, because he could get a goal out of nothing. Whereas the worst thing about Hull City at the moment is that we play well, we create chances, we have so much of the possession, but we are extremely inefficient. And that would be okay if we had a good defence, but we don't. Every team that plays against us is more direct. They get more chances with 30%, 40% possession, and then they score 1 or 2 of the 3 chances they have, whereas we don't score any of the 10 we make. And you'd think that will turn around at some point, but we're halfway through the season and it's been like that all year. We still have a very good chance to have a good season, but we've basically lost key players at the key point in the year where there are twice as many games. So an injury is twice as bad over Christmas when you've got that congested period. So, something could go our way early in the Sunderland game, but on current form, we've got too many players out at the moment, and I think it will be too much for us away from home on Friday.
Well, you kind of alluded to it there. Maybe in kind of recent weeks, sides have played against Holland, conceded possession, and then maybe looked to kind of hit them on the counter-attack. It's going to be 2 teams on Friday that like to dominate the ball. In terms of the possession stats in the Championship, Sunderland are 3rd with an average of 57.5%. Hull are 5th with an average of 55% possession. Obviously, Sunderland are the home team. They'll be expected to have more of the ball. But how do you see Hull approaching this game against Hull on Friday, against Sunderland on Friday?
I mean, what I do is, because I don't trust. I mean, everyone says Greaves and Jones are a really great centre-back pairing, and they are very good players. But defensively, the whole sort of back four has struggled. So I might just try and. Vitinha isn't going to do this, but I just try and stay as compact as possible and hope that our Carvalho or, well, he's sort of the only sort of quick player we're going to have up front. Maybe we have Aliar, Sayed Manesh on the pitch. He's very quick, but has no end product. Just try and hit on the counter-attack, because I think that the confidence is so low. We're going to make a mistake at the back. We're trying to sign a goalkeeper. We've agreed a deal. We're just waiting on work permits. It would be really helpful to have the Croatian international goalkeeper Ivor Pandor available for this game, but we won't. We're going to have Ryan Alsop, and though playing out on the from the back, he's better at that than a lot of goalkeepers. He's still not really great at that. And I think the team's lacking a lot of confidence. I'd change the tactics just for this game and then restart against, Millwall in a few weeks' time.
But you don't think Rosenior will do that? You think
No,
he'll still try and...
we're going to stay the same system, which, has worked fairly well previously. We're going to try and do what Sunderland do and keep the possession. But I keep saying it. My confidence is so low, which is such a shame because, we're still in a good position in the table. I'd be very happy with the amount of points we're off the playoffs. It's 1 point if you said at the start of the season, but it's just because, I guess it is a bit arrogant to think this, but realistically, we should be no lower than fifth. We should be a comfortable fifth with the amount of games we've completely dominated and the amount of chances we've spurned and the amount of chances we've given away, which is not that many, and yet they still score. We keep shooting ourselves in the foot. Senior's probably said that 15 different games this season. There's only been a handful of games where we've not deserved to win when we haven't done. So, yes, we're in a good position going to second half of the season, 1 point. That's pretty good. But it's just so frustrating because we should be much more confident rather than thinking that if we lose the game, which we could well do, we could be down to 14th, which is just ridiculous. It's about 10 places below where we should be. That shows how tight the competition is this season. But we'll play the same system. I just hope it's that first half an hour we need to play well. Or, it'll be the Sky curse. We're rubbish on Sky Sports. It'll be an awful refereeing decision. Billy Sharp will miss some sitters. And then Sunderland will score a goal cutting in from the wing. Jack Clark, will cut in and score from outside the box like we conceded in every game since about November. That's all. That'll be how it goes.
Well, you mentioned Jack Clark there. How much have you seen of Sunderland this season and kind of what have you made of them?
I'm not sure. I've heard that Sunderland fans maybe, despite having, fairly mixed results, aren't hugely happy with the manager. Is that right?
No, it's been a underwhelmed is how I would probably describe Michael Beale's appointment from the Sunderland fans.
And it'd be interesting to know your thoughts on the game we just had a few weeks ago. But I felt that, Sunderland had two chances. They had Patrick Roberts 1-on-1, and then Jack Clark from outside the box. I know he's a very good player, perhaps a little bit like us. Philogene.
Well, Roberts is actually out of Friday's game. He's out with an injury.
Okay. But I know that Clark and Philogene are probably similar in that. Obviously, both teams have a whole lot of good players to be in that position in the league, but they probably are clearly the best player in each team. And so I'm sure you're happy that he's still at the club, at least at this point in January. I thought getting rid of Mowbray was a bit... I know you can always think of pushing on, but I never really liked the idea that you've had a good season and then you get rid of the manager. You've got to ride that momentum, I think, and he did well with a young team. But Sunderland will be there and thereabouts towards the end of the season, I'm sure.
Well, the side's very close in the table heading into Friday night's game. Actually, there's just between Coventry in 6th and Bristol City in 14th. There's just 4 points separating them. Sunderland 7th with 40 points as well as Coventry, and Hull just 2 points back, or just 1 point back behind Sunderland actually in 9th place. They're on 39 points. So incredibly tight round those kind of playoff places. So what is the kind of expectation now at Hull? You mentioned obviously had a good start to the season, but with the players unavailable, maybe recent performances haven't been as good. But what kind of does the fan base think is possible now for the remainder of the season?
Well, I think it really depends on who we sign from now till the end of the month. Jaden Philogene will be back. He's one of the best wingers in the division. That's good. Delap is out. He was a good striker. Sharp, I don't know if you can rely on a 37-year-old who only got 2 goals in his last championship season. I know he's scored a lot of goals in the championship, but a while ago. Connolly, injury prone and is out at the moment. So we need to sign a good striker. I know that they'd technically be fourth choice, or at least the fourth one we've got at the club, but we need to sign a good striker. And Carvalho, he's a good signing, so I think that's good.
I was going to ask, how's he done? Has he played much since he came in? Because that seemed like a good deal for Hull.
Well, he's only had the one match. He couldn't play against Birmingham in the Cup because he wasn't in the first game, so he couldn't play in the replay. Yeah. Ridiculous rule when you've got so many injuries. He's at the club. He's not cup tied. Absurd rule, in my opinion.
He will probably be in from the start against Sunderland, though.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, if he wasn't playing, then I think Rossini would be sacked on the spot because the players we've got who are fit, it's always unfortunate that the players who are fit are always the ones we don't really want to play. Aliar and Lakilo, those are the wingers we have fit at the moment. Both have had poor seasons, injury prone. Aliar will probably play at some point on Friday. Very quick player, no end product, but he's got something about him where I know Lakilo scored against Birmingham, but that's the first thing he's done in 20 games. Other than lose the ball constantly. But yeah, Carvalho will be a pretty good player. But yeah, if we get this goalkeeper that we've agreed the deal for, that gets over the line, hopefully that's an improvement, and we'll definitely be signing a left back. But I think we just needed to go on a run at one point this season. It still doesn't feel like the team's really clicked. We have got a lot of good, young, bright, talented players, but I think it really depends on who we sign, because if we don't get a striker in, then because Dunlap's going to be out until the last few games of the season, it'll be like last year. Tufan was playing up front against Sunderland in the away game last year. He scored 2 goals, but he didn't really work as a striker very much. So it's very difficult to know. I still think we'll finish top 10. Playoffs looking more like something we really have to aim for rather than a nice positive thing, like a bonus because of the signings we're getting in. Ajahn Elajela, the owner, putting a lot of money into the club. We sort of do need playoffs to justify signing all these players. So I think top 10, but if I was to, realistically guess at the moment, I don't think we'll get in the playoffs.
Well, of course, last season was that crazy 4-4 game, wasn't it, on Good Friday? So Hull scoring the last-minute penalty there to take a point. But just finally, Nathaniel, before we let you go, how do you see the game kind of playing out on Friday night? And we'll just ask you for a quick score prediction as well.
Well, it'll probably be like the last game. We'll start slowly. A refereeing decision will sort of kill the game. Sunderland will go 1-0 up. We'll struggle, and we'll concede probably a really rubbish cross, and then Clark will cut in and score from outside the box. Logically, I don't see anything other than another poor result for Hull, and it'll just be even more frustrating because we should really be 5th. There's no. If you were to look at every single game we've had, and it was all silhouetted, and you didn't know which club was who, you'd think, oh yeah, that team A, would have won about 50% more of the games we've had, and we'd be 5th comfortably, but we're not. So of course you need to create your chances, but 9 times out of 10 we'd win these games, and we don't. So that's sort of frustrating bit at the moment, but yeah, logically I don't see anything other than a Sunderland win. I think I was going to predict 5-0 City win every week, but because we've been so poor, I'm going 5-0 Sunderland.
Well, Sunderland fans will know. They know all about kind of dominating games, getting into good positions, and not taking chances. Kind of the XG stat has been thrown about around, and with Sunderland kind of creating more chances than their opponents and not taking them and not getting the results all the time. But it's a big game for Sunderland as well, for Michael Beale after the defeat against Newcastle in the FA Cup, losing to Ipswich last weekend. And as we kind of alluded to earlier, the pressure was on him when he came in, replacing Tony Mowbray, who was doing well. So, and if you don't win a couple of games, you can easily slip down the table. Sunderland 7th at the minute. But as we mentioned before, not a lot. To be fair,
losing to Newcastle and Ipswich is not anything to be too annoyed about. I think he's only had 5 or 6 games.
Yeah, so he came in just before Christmas. The first game was against Coventry on the 23rd of
You see,
December.
that was poor, but I think give him a tiny bit of time.
It's just it was a tough job for him to come into, given that Tony Mowbray was doing well, and the fans were probably expecting a bigger name to come in, and as I say, were underwhelmed when Michael Beale came in. So he definitely deserves a chance, but the pressure is kind of on him from the word go, given that the nature of his appointment. So a big game for Sunderland. I think they will win on Friday night, given what you've said about Hull's injuries and Hull's difficulties. I think Sunderland didn't play badly at Ipswich, as you mentioned there. Ipswich playing very well at the minute, up there in second in the table. So no kind of real shame, massive shame losing that game, although the kind of manner of the goal, the winning goal that Sunderland conceded was very disappointing, coming from a set piece and a header. But I think Sunderland will bounce back on Friday. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Sunderland win.
Well, if you want a bigger name, Jose Mourinho's out of a job now.
Well, yeah, that would be you get good odds on that happening. But as we said, Michael Beale in charge at the minute, and Liam Rossini in charge of Hull, and they'll come head to head on Friday night as Sunderland face Hull at the Stadium of Light. So, Nathaniel, thanks a lot for joining me on the latest episode of the Raw podcast. And if you like what we do here at the Raw podcast, please consider subscribing on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and leaving a review. And for all the latest SAFC news, you can head over to the SAFC section of the Sunderland Echo website, and we'll have more build-up ahead of Friday's match. We'll also have live updates, analysis, and more from the Stadium of Light as Sunderland face Hull, as well as all the latest transfer news. Once again, thanks a lot for listening to the Raw podcast.